Hello and welcome to this week's What Were They Thinking? The first news is astronomical. It is a story about the successful deployment of a solar sail. This is a technology that uses sunlight to propel objects within space and as a result requires no internal or external power output. When you consider the costs of just running a car on the ground, the costs for a spacefaring vehicle are astronomical by comparison. The Lightsail 2 is a spacecraft that has been in orbit for a little over a month now. Last week, it was able to deploy its sail. In the 8 days since then, it has orbited 1.7 kilometers, purely based on the sun's photonic energy. To explain how it works, think of it as a giant mylar blanket. It catches the light, or specifically the photons from the sun. They impart a tiny amount of energy. This energy, because of the design of both the sail and vehicle, allow it to be pushed. Multiply this by all the photons that are hitting it over a very large surface area, and you get a surprising amount of energy. When it's orbiting a planet, there is one downside. There is obviously a dark side to any planet. The Lightsail 2 overcomes this by using an onboard algorithm that will rotate the sail to accommodate this every 50 minutes. This is in comparison to the Icarus, which was deployed by Japan and has not been able to achieve the same degree of movement and modification on the fly. There is a lower and upper limit to the speed at which the solar sail can be used in atmosphere. But this does not mean deploying it in a search for extraterrestrial life would have the same limitations. When you consider the probes that have been deployed into space, the very earliest of which is only just leaving our solar system, the use of these solar sails could be a huge benefit. The ability to deploy them in an environment where they can gain speed on the way out but not lose that speed to resistance given space is a vacuum, means that probes can be deployed in relatively short order, sent into space, and easily outpace our earliest efforts. There is prospective allowance that this could even be scaled up to allow spacecraft to use the same technology. Given that it's a relatively low propulsion benefit from it, these would need to be large structures. In less astronomical news, a swarm of flying ants has just come into Britain, such a large swarm that it can be seen from space. On meteorological radars, it looks like rain clouds. However, this annual intrusion is in fact a swarm of insects. The Meteorological Office made note of it in a tweet where they described their view from space, showing what the radar notes as precipitation, but it isn't. This unusual occurrence is an annual event related to a change in weather. As the weather warms up, the black garden ant queens leave their nests and seek mates to start their own. This leads to a swarm of males trying to mate with these new queens. Insofar as this swarm of ants seems unusual, it may only be a development of our technology and ability to identify the changes that occur. More unusual and interesting is the zombie-like tree being kept alive through grafting itself to other trees in its locality. A tree stump is being kept alive through the supply of water and nutrition, even though it has no foliage of its own, by tying into other trees in the area, creating a sort of superorganism. This has kept the one tree alive that is only a stump. This bizarre zombie Kauri pine stump is located on New Zealand's North Island. Although it's not well understood why this has occurred and what benefit there may be to the other trees, it has been, at least vaguely noted in the past, with inconsistent and often inconclusive evidence. This example in New Zealand is interesting and may be indicative of other mechanisms that could be important. particularly in environmental conservation. In other environmental news, a mosquito has been found in Florida carrying the deadly eastern equine encephalitis virus. This is normally a rare infection. It's often only found in remote, swampy environments, far from where humans are. This means that it's very difficult to become infected unless you travel to these boonies. The virus was identified in a flock of chickens that the local government uses to monitor and track infectious diseases. There is some concern that with global warming and expanding populations, there is an increased chance of people being exposed to these otherwise rare and normally hard to be exposed to diseases. The next story relates to a recent video on organ donations. A man found that his mother's body that had been donated for science has in fact been used for blast testing. People can choose to donate their remains a number of ways after death. The most common is to offer organs for donations. This makes sense if you are a relatively young person. For the elderly, where their organs may not be suitable, they may instead choose to offer their body to science. This can in turn be used a number of ways. Perhaps the best known is as a cadaver for medical students. The students can learn a lot from these bodies, especially about anatomy, physiology, and to practice techniques that are very hard to otherwise have an opportunity to get experience with. It also gives them an opportunity to explore the pathologies that may have led to the donor's death. Not all bodies donated are donated in their entirety. The story in question is an example of this, where only the brain was donated and the remains were returned to the family after being cremated. The family expected and had explicitly said the brain was only to be used for research. Unfortunately, as has been described in a Reuters article, this has not always happened. In fact, it was sold to the army, and then was used in testing of explosives. This is one of the things that should be discussed with family, friends, and significant partners when looking to either allow your body to be used for organ transplants or to donate it to science. You and those who are significant to you should be aware that organs may be accepted but may not be used for the intended purpose, even when you sign off on paperwork that explicitly limits what they can be used for. This important consideration is for their benefit and yours, and that they understand why you are making your decisions and what may happen as a result. The next story is a medical case study relating to a 31-year-old Portuguese woman who has had a birth control implant moved when it shouldn't from her arm to her lung. The woman in question had developed abnormal vaginal bleeding for 3 months. She went to see her doctor, who identified that the contraceptive implant was not where it was supposed to be. These contraceptive implants are normally effective for a number of years, in comparison to the contraceptive pill, which must be taken for a period of time before it achieves stability, and then taken every day thereafter. This can avoid some of the issues of missing doses. The first implant she received was in 2010, and the third in 2017. Each was about the size of a matchstick, a small thin rod. This implant leaches the medication over time, which allows for a controlled release. Fortunately, they were able to find the implant using an ultrasound in her left lung. Using video-assisted surgery, they found it and removed it, and after 4 days, she was released from hospital without any major complications. Contraceptive implants are rarely, if ever, a problem, and if done professionally and with an accredited doctor, should not pose any problems, unlike in this case. In another medical case study, Indian dentists had pulled more than 500 teeth from a 7-year-old boy. The boy was taken to Savitha Dental College and Hospital in Chennai, India. where he was treated for swelling in his lower right jaw. What they found was an ondontoma, which is a large bag-like structure, and it contained 526 teeth. The ondontoma is a tumor-like growth, and it prevents permanent molar teeth from growing in the boy's body. Each of the pulled teeth was in fact immature and not really developed. These rudimentary teeth developed in the bag-like tissue, which would have gradually gotten worse, which is why it's fortunate they were able to catch it in the early stages. The teeth varied from 0.1 to 15 millimeters in size. They did, however, have a mostly intact structure, with crown, root, and enamel coating. Fortunately, the boy was left with a full set of teeth for his age. He has 21, where most children have 20 and adults have 32. The case study is more an anomalous report than an ongoing issue, and is likely attributable to a combination of genetics, environment, and more that would probably not be repeated in another individual unless they were subject to the same random circumstances. While the young boy was not able to do anything about his circumstances, the teenagers involved in the next could. Teenagers who were trying to outcompete each other and ultimately did about 1,000 squats wound up in intensive care. The two Chinese teens are lucky that they were not more seriously injured after engaging in a video dare. This is very much like a Tide Pod challenge and other similarly stupid things that adolescents get in their mind to do. The two patients in question completed the 1,000 squats over 2 to 3 hours. This meant, for all intents and purposes, they were pushing their body hard and very, very incorrectly for 2 to 3 hours, which is an inadvisable workout schedule for anyone. They both felt sore after the fact, but they felt that this should have been expected. After they woke up the next day, they realized something had gone terribly wrong. At least one could not bend their leg. Their urine was also a dark brown color. This dark brown color comes from myoglobin. Myoglobin is something that's produced when the muscles break down. The brown color itself is something called myoglobinuria, and is one of the obvious signs of a more serious issue. That issue being that the body cannot cope with the breakdown of muscle tissue. The kidneys can't remove it properly, and as a result, the blood plasma concentration spikes suddenly. This can in turn result in serious kidney damage, and for the most part, kidney damage is not reversible. Fortunately, in this case, they were able to put the patients on a drip. This allowed the body to become rehydrated and removed a lot of the material that would have caused kidney damage, and ultimately damaged other organs. This then allowed them to recover. It's a perfect example of why you should not follow online or viral challenges without either having been prepared for them beforehand or understanding what harm they might cause. In news related to science, Japan has approved experiments creating human-animal hybrids. If you think that perhaps that somebody's been watching too much Fullmetal Alchemist, unfortunately no. Japan is one of the few countries that allows the hybridization like this. Normally, they would not allow the animals to be carried through to full term. The animals would be terminated and the results analyzed. The researchers have been given approval to take the animals to full term, even if they do not expect that to happen for some years yet. As heinous as this research sounds, there is an important reason behind it. The organ transplant industry outside of China is very much in demand. There are not enough organs and too many people needing them. This research would allow the animals to be grown with the necessary organs in them. These could then be transplanted, and, at least in theory, not be any worse at this stage than transplanting from another human. Over the next 2 years, the researchers involved will watch the rodent model they are using to see if only the pancreas has development of the human pluripotent stem cells. If they find that the brain has more than 30% composition of human cells, they will suspend the experiment. This was part of the government's conditions to prevent humanized animals. If this is successful, they plan to move on to using pigs. Pigs are closer to humans and, in theory, should be more easily transplanted. At present, pigs can sometimes be used as a surrogate for either liver failure. It allows the use of the animal because their body functionally is very similar to a human. Going forwards, it may be possible that humanized organs could be transplanted or at least used to greater effect. Ultimately, it may lead to the development of more complex structures. For now, you need to rely on the next story, in which a robotic arm, inspired by the Star Wars series, has given an amputee sensation once more. Prosthetics have been in existence for millennia. Robotic prostheses are only a relatively recent invention. They're a combination of microcircuitry, complicated mechanics, and the ability to integrate them into an existing structure, like the arm or hand. However, one thing that they have always lacked is a sense of touch. This has presented a major issue, in that it does not allow the person using it to exhibit fine motor control, and especially the strength they use. The arm mechanically is very similar to existing technology. What it adds to that is the ability to interact with the nervous system, and this is one reason why it has taken 15 years of development to get to this point where somebody was able to test it. Electrodes link both the arm itself to the nervous system above the site of amputation. This creates a linkage between the user and the prostheses. The software that runs the arm itself learns about the person's neural activity. It then modifies the algorithm and software it uses to adapt to the user's neural signals. This creates basic dexterity. This is not the first technology that has allowed an amputee to feel. The important development here is that the amputee is not directly linked into the prosthetic via a brain implant, but instead from the site of amputation, which is both less invasive and more natural. It removes the need for invasive surgery, external products, and other things that would remove the natural nature and the return to a normal life for the person using it. The technology as it stands now is simply a development of existing technology, but it has the capability to expand to other things like heat and pain, or be used wirelessly to allow the researchers to work external to it. This would be a huge benefit in things like surgery. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.